geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Cleveland and the Geek.
And welcome to Cleveland the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing. We're going to get to them later, but they're awesome, and you can get them at places now. It's fantastic. I'm John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Kleeman of The Athletic.
Season's over, John. We did it.
Season is over.
We made it.
Let the off-season begin. I'm sure things will get better.
Oh, yeah. Well,
unless your name is Rocco Baldelli. Actually, things probably are better for Rocco Baldelli right now.
That was the premise. Everybody wrote Rocco Baldelli fired, if you didn't know. Spoiler alert. We're going to talk a lot about that. But also, we've already talked about that. We already done 2 episodes essentially about that on the for the Patreon folks, patreon.com/Kleeman. But we'll get into it today, obviously. But like everybody wrote about it, and everybody, you find your own angle, kind of. My angle for The Athletic was that the front office kind of used Rocco as a shield. Right. Like, here he is. Here's your sacrificial lamb. Leave us alone. Lavelli Neal for the Strib, right. His angle was Rocco's lucky to be out of this mess.
Right. Yeah.
He's the one who doesn't have to stick around. And to that point, he gets paid because they picked up his 2026 option, which we'll talk about that a little later too. But just to put a bow on not a great present of a season, the Twins, the season ends in Philly where John was in attendance. They lose 2 out of 3. They finish 70-92, which is the first 90-loss season since 2016. And the reason that's kind of interesting is, first of all, it's a decade ago. Second of all, that was the year they fired Terry Ryan and then hired Derek Falvey, who it's kind of come full circle here. And now he's possibly on the hot seat. Maybe not. Maybe. The other thing we haven't talked about, because we skipped a free episode, was they did indeed finish with not only the worst attendance in the history of Target Field, but the worst attendance by a Twins team anywhere since 2000 at the Metrodome, when they were a 90-something loss team still managed by Tom Kelly. And that's an interesting year.
Right.
That's the last time they sold fewer tickets than this year was 25 years ago at the Metrodome. And then the next year is when the Poleads agreed to contract the team.
Yeah, that off season is when the Poleads agreed to contract the team for $250 million. Right?
Great vibes in general at this point.
Yeah. I'm sure things will be better in 2026, Aaron.
Yeah, sure. You feel free to debate squad and try to pitch me on that idea later in the show.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm getting bad vibes about 2026 now as well. So
yeah, you're the optimistic one though, John. Come on.
Yeah,
buddy.
not as much over the last 24, 48 hours. Our last Patreon episode had a number of people from within the Twins organization kind of reach out to me. And
really?
Boy, yeah.
Good. Better you than me for once.
And but these people are anonymously reaching out to sort of tell me what's going on a little bit behind the scenes. And boy, it's not looking great for 2026. Let's just say that.
Yeah, the 2 ways we tend to be reached out to by Twins people after particularly rant-filled podcasts, which the last one on Patreon we had just gotten back from the end of season media session with Derek Falvey and Jeremy Zoll, where they announced the Baldelli thing and took questions. So we got into a whole lot of stuff. If you enjoy this free version, I think there will be a lot in that show to get into, but it was very rant filled on my part, also somewhat on John's part. He's just less prone to ranting. But when we get into that, when we have kind of emotional shows or rant filled or even just criticism towards the Twins filled shows, what that one certainly was, we hear in 2 ways from the Twins, I would say. One is they get in touch because they're mad, and they say you shouldn't have said that, or why would you got this little detail wrong, and that invalidates your whole point or whatever. Or what John just described, which is we hear from Twins people and go, unfortunately, you guys were right on the money there. A little too correct, maybe.
Or it's yikes. Yeah, you're getting a good sense of this or something like that.
Or you don't know the half of it.
Well, yeah, that's
sometimes the vibe.
Yes.
So we'll get into a lot of that stuff on today's show too. But just to end of the season stuff, there wasn't look, this team hasn't been relevant now for 2 months as is. But I did think there was the starting rotation finished on a high note, not just one or two guys,
Right.
but essentially the whole 6-man rotation
Right.
by the end of the season. And that includes Mick Abel coming back to the majors.
Unbelievable
and
start by
pitching
him in Philly. Right.
really, really well against a good team that just traded him away. And I'm sure there
Right.
were a ton of emotions involved in that. And that was a difficult matchup too. And he looked great from a stuff standpoint, from a result standpoint. You know, you look at basically the whole turn
Yeah.
was a good final turn in the rotation.
Simeon Woods Richardson had an unbelievable end of the season.
He looked good. Taj Bradley finished on a relative high note.
Yeah.
Joe Ryan even finished after some struggles over the past 6 weeks on a relative high note. Bailey Ober even finished on a relative, high note for
Relative is the key word there. Yeah, right. Yep.
and so I think, even Zebby, where it was like, okay, I start to see the vision a little bit of a rotation, except as I've endlessly pointed out, probably too many times over the last 2 months, that changes quite a bit if you trade Pablo Lopez and or Joe Ryan. But, some of the young guys, I'd certainly rather it's one start, one turn through the rotation. Although in the case of Simeon Woods Richardson in particular, it's not just one start. It's really a month solid, or maybe even more than that. Since he got called back up after the demotion to AAA, he's just looked really good. Yeah. And one of the things we talked about with him over the last year even is because he lacks the raw stuff and velocity and swing and miss and just overpowering ability that some of these other guys do, Abel, Bradley, Festa, Matthews, etc. He tends to like fly under the radar a little bit. And I think a lot of that is just because it's harder to see like a frontline starter type of upside in him just with what he's working with. But the reality is he's just been much, much more effective than those guys as a major league starting pitcher.
Yes.
And upside is certainly important, certainly as the Twins build towards the future. But he's just been a solid major league pitcher at this point. A good average or slightly above average guy now for, I don't know, 250, 300 innings or something like that. And a lot of these guys who we're focused on their upside and their velo and their raw stuff and their swing and miss ability, they'd kill to have been that effective.
Right.
Bradley's got a 5-something ERA for his career. Mick Abel's got one good outing or two good outings for his career. And, Festa, Matthews have 5-something ERAs too. So I don't want to act like I think this is some vastly different Simeon Woods Richardson in terms of future upside, but I do think it's an improved version. I think adding the splitter more and more to the mix, refining the slider a little bit has given him, not in terms of like velocity, but just in terms of swing and miss.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had something like 33 strikeouts and 27 innings in September. We've never seen that from him over a month. That's a big number.
Yes, it's gotten John Verklempt. It's been so impressive to see.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
So yeah, that was a, I don't know, silver lining. Good final week, at least something to hang your hat on heading into an offseason that I don't know that it's going to be that enjoyable of an offseason, like for, like you mentioned at the beginning. But here's what I am fairly convinced it's going to be an active offseason. And it's been 2 years or 3, I guess, since we've seen that.
Well, I mean, we're going to have some activity at the start of it, right? Because we're going to have a new manager. So that's activity, right? We're going to have 2 new minority owners, we think, be approved sometime in the first half of the offseason. So that's going to be activity.
Yeah.
Potentially, like you seem to feel, and I'm starting to wonder myself, that we might see some players traded away, such as some frontline starters or something like that.
Getting at, basically.
That's also would be activity. Although I'm not as sure about that, but I'm after my discussions over last 24, 48 hours, I'm starting to think maybe that could happen, which is a gut punch to me.
Yeah.
But other than that, I wonder how much more we're going to I do think by the end of this offseason, we're going to have a real sense of what the future of this team holds for the next 2-3 years in terms of how serious they are in competing, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean,
and what ownership's intentions are, and what the front office's intentions are. I don't know. We'll see.
I just got a text from Betsy Halfand, former and future guest of the Pioneer Press, that just says, "Can you explain something to me?" It's always good when people do that. I take that as like dealer's choice. Like I can just pick something and explain it to her.
I
I'd be
find
like,
it's funny because I just got a text from Betsy Helfand as well, but it was all about how they've been using the various caterers for our wedding. For they went to Cafe Latte for the desserts, they went to Brasa for the food, like all the stuff
yeah,
that was.
we had Brasa. By the way, since we last had a free episode, John's daughter's gotten married. We had
That's right.
we had
Yeah,
a
that's
great
right.
time at the wedding.
Yeah,
Brasa was the catered food.
yeah,
I was amazed. Now I live by Brasa, and I go to Brasa like once a week, probably.
right. Yeah,
It's great
which
food.
is, by the way, good for you, man. I'd
Yeah,
love to have that within like a 4 block radius of me. I'd
yeah.
go there all the time.
Well, they will deliver it to you, John.
Well, whatever.
Because can I tell you something? They deliver it to me sometimes. But I was amazed how many people at my table were like, "Oh, this is pretty good," and I'm like, "Yeah, nope, no, S is good. It's probably like one of the best 10 restaurants in the Twin Cities." And they're like,
Right.
"Oh." And so I said, "You got to go there." Like, just go. So I'm glad to hear that. But this has been restaurant talk with Aaron and John.
And Betsy Helfand gossip.
Sure. Uh, but okay, so there was a little silver lining starting rotation. The meat of this, since the season ended, is they fired Rocco Baldelli on Monday in a press release. And then Tuesday morning, John and I both attended their end of season media session, press conference, whatever you want to call it, which is basically, it's funny. The Star Trib sent a photographer to it.
Yeah.
And I've seen a few pictures, and I sat I've learned my lesson for media events because about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, it might have been Buxton's Extension. I don't even remember. It was in Truly on Deck, wherever it was called at that point. And they streamed it on like twins.com. And the whole time, I didn't check my phone because we were like recording it or whatever. Glenn Perkins, who I think was at home watching on the stream, texted me approximately 400 photos of my big bald head.
I was about to say,
On
was
the
it about
stream.
the back of your head? Yeah.
Just the back
Beautiful.
of my head.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not gotten better since then. That's not how these things tend to work, you know?
Yeah.
And so ever since then, whenever there's an event that's going to have cameras or streaming or even just news cameras or whatever, I very strategically will sometimes even say, if there's a cameraman there, where's everyone going to set up? And so then I go, and so John came into the press conference and I was very, very far off to the right, the furthest
right,
off to
yeah.
the right. And I saw a picture in the Star Trib. I think it was attached to Royce's column. And it was like an overhead shot from behind of all the media in a semicircle and the table in the front with Falvey and Zoll. And the last person you can see on the right is John's big bald head.
I was going to say, is it my
And
big bald head? Yeah.
I did it because I'm 3 inches over and not in the screen.
You found it exactly the right spot.
I was
That's
like,
hilarious.
yes.
That's fantastic.
So yes.
All right, now
but-
I'm going to go find Royce's story. And look for
Oh,
that
I'll send it to you. It's great
you
because
will.
like everyone just looks miserable. Like it's a great little snapshot of the whole beat. So anyway, maybe we'll post this on Twitter or something, or we'll attach it to the YouTube or something like that. But anyway, they fire Baldelli, then they do the press conference and they answer questions about it. The next day, we're going to talk largely about that on today's show.
We did
obviously.
it, and when they fired Baldelli, we should just mention we did an immediate emergency Patreon episode, like
that
we
night.
always do on that stuff. That was what, Monday night, 15 minutes after I landed at Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, 45 minutes after I landed at Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, getting back from Philadelphia, we jumped on a Zoom call to record a immediate 1 hour, 1.5 hour reaction to the Baldelli firing, what we thought of it, what we thought we would see in the upcoming press conference, whether we not thought it was fair, whether or not we thought it was warranted, whether or not we thought he was just being the fall guy. There's such a way. We'll try to give a little summary of that here, but we really recommend that you consider joining the Patreon.
John for God's sakes, he got a police escort from the airport. So make it worthwhile.
That's
you know how
right.
much that costs?
That's right. Yeah.
We blew our whole budget for the year on that police escort,
That's
but
right.
it was worth it. So I guess we can talk about Baldelli. We
Let's
can
do
just
that.
mix them together. I mean, obviously there was the initial reaction, like you said, that we had on Patreon, and then the next day we were able to ask questions about it. So we can kind of roll all that together. I will say that in general, and this is what some of my rants were about on the Patreon side, I felt like And this perhaps bothers me more than bothers most, because my goal is to get information and pass it along to readers and listeners. But I really did feel like Falvey, and then the little that Zoll talked also, Falvey, this is his MO in general, but I thought it was as extreme as it's ever been at the Tuesday press conference, where never before has one man said so much while saying so little. And he talked about Baldelli, and he answered questions for damn near an hour. So it wasn't
Right.
like for lack
Yeah.
of
I mean,
talking.
listen, the Twins do a nice job at giving
Yes.
us the chance to ask a lot of questions. And I do believe you're more harsh about Falvey on
Yes.
this aspect than I am. I do believe he tries to share about as much as he feel like he can share, or what his mental state is regarding some of this stuff. But I also feel like there's just stuff he can't say, and he's not saying it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to get info on payroll, and he blocked every shot.
No, you're right.
And we tried to even
Or
just
or
bigger,
even or even whether or not he thought they would be competitive at 2026, like
right?
what the expectations are.
Just questions like, what's the direction of the
Right.
team? Can you compete next year? What would you tell a new manager candidate? John asked him that. Like, John's like, well, they're going to want to know this stuff. What are you going to tell them? And he just danced and danced and danced and blocked every shot. And all guys are like this in these positions, these C-suite positions for billion-dollar industries. They're not in the business of revealing information, but the Twins are in such a state here as an organization, on the field, off the field. There's so many unanswered questions, and I just felt like it was an example of fielding all the questions, dancing your way out of them, given quotes that had to be parsed, and you had to connect the dots, and you had to read between the lines, and it puts us in a position where it's like we're just openly speculating, because what else can we do? There's no
Right.
kind of firm details even, and I found it not unique. I found it frustrating, perhaps more so because of the state that they're in, where it's like, I think these are more legitimate questions than they have ever been. Just, is this team trying?
Right.
Are
Yes.
the owners going to slash payroll again? Are you guys just looking to kind of exist in the MLB landscape and just
Yeah.
go through years of not caring about anything?
What does ownership even look like after we get
Right.
the minority stakeholders that are joining things? Who are these people, and what is their motivation? Is their
Right.
motivation that of building a franchise, or is that of getting a quick profit and getting the hell out? Like, there's a lot of stuff like that that is
Yeah.
they're sitting there somewhat above the C-suite level on that, but he's the primary
Well, and
conduit and
that's
source
the
of
other
that
change.
information to that. And
Yeah.
when he is either unable to share that information or unwilling to share
Yeah.
that information, yeah, you're right. The result is going to be a fair amount of speculation. Like, if it's bad news, then deliver the bad news. And if you don't know, then say, I mean, I guess what he did say is, I don't know. But
Right.
I think you've got to have a sense of it at this point. It is October. Your the budgeting process, if not finalized, is at least most of the way there.
And the state of this team has been this for 2 months now. Once
Right.
you make the fire sale, this
Right.
didn't sneak up on them.
Yeah.
And I also think and again, this maybe hit me stronger than it hit a lot of people, but in the statement that they released Monday morning to officially fire Baldelli, Falvey had a quote within there, which is written and vetted, and they chose to put it out, where he said, I take personal responsibility for the last 2 seasons. And that hit my ear so weird to say, I take personal responsibility while announcing the firing of someone else and keeping your job, which is now you've been promoted in the last year to a dual job, which is he runs the business side and the baseball side. And he's the guy. Like, and that was part of, I think, what's changed in my mind and make it more extreme. They always dance around stuff, but what makes it more extreme now is you look at Falvey and you go, well, if you don't know, who knows? And if you're not willing to say, who is willing to say? Like, you are the guy.
Right.
Other than the poll ads themselves, who don't hold these
Right.
sort of press conferences and weren't there for this one, you're it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and so, but then also for him to say, I take personal responsibility, in writing. Okay, that hit me. And I was planning to ask him about that. What could he elaborate? What does he mean by taking personal responsibility? But before I could even ask him about that Tuesday, he reused that exact phrase 4 different times, saying I take personal responsibility. He also, a fifth one, he said I take personal accountability, which is
Right.
essentially the same thing. And so I did ask him about that. And he didn't give a real satisfying answer. He basically said the team was bad, and that keeps me up at night, and I feel bad for our fans and our players and our staff and all that. But that doesn't really get to what. And I know people will say, well, what do you want him to do? Like, what is
Right.
personal responsibility? You want him to step down? You want him to take a demotion? Well, no. I mean, sure, but no. What I think is he's chosen to say that. He's chosen that specific phrasing and he's repeated it 5 or 6 times on different days in writing, in person, etc. I didn't put those words in his mouth. And to me, that is a very specific choice when firing someone else and not having any effect on your own job, which is now elevated compared to a year ago. And if you're going to come out in writing and then repeat it a half dozen times the very next day and say, I take personal responsibility, I think it's a fair follow-up question to say, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Elaborate on that. And he wasn't really able to do that. And so I thought folding that into just this sort of tap dancing around all the questions, it was a very unsatisfying, it was long. And to your point, I absolutely give them credit for sitting up there and answering questions.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make the answers any more satisfying. And I felt like for a team that is in free fall on the field and sort of has been in free fall off the field, with a fan base that is rightfully sick of it. They're sick of the corporate speak. They're sick of the jargon that means nothing, and they're sick of the AI generated seemingly letters to fans and all that. And you got a chance to sit in front of a bunch of people who are going to report on it and just give actual answers. And you chose not to do that, and you chose to repeat personal responsibility, where it's like, where is the personal responsibility? And so I just came away from all of it thinking like, man, was that not satisfying at all? And I don't even mean from a writer or podcaster standpoint, because we're going to talk about it no matter what.
Right.
I just mean I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a fan. And look, I've been a lifelong Twins fan. I'm from Minnesota. My fandom has changed over the years, obviously. I don't, live and die with every run scored at this point because I'm covering the team. But it's not hard to put myself back in those shoes. And I think
Sure.
if you put yourself in those shoes, and John lives in those shoes, they're orange Vans usually.
No, I got the new Jordan kicks.
Really?
Becky's told you about them. I'm sure she's told you about them. They're really good.
Yeah, we have a lot of talk about your wardrobe, John. They go great with the compression socks, I'm sure.
You ask Becky about my shoes. She's gonna rave about them.
She's busy on her 400th listen of the Taylor Swift album at this point. Unclear she still exists like in my household beyond just a listening device.
Sure, got it. Yeah.
But when she comes up for air, like 3 weeks from now, I'll ask her about
All
it.
right. Yeah.
Okay, but so setting the vibes of the press conferences aside and my personal feelings on it aside, some of the interesting details as they relate to Baldelli were, I thought, that he said he talked to him for 2 hours Monday. He fired him face to face, which is how you should do it. And at least how Falvey described, I mean, we don't have Baldelli's side of things. I'd like to hopefully eventually get Baldelli's side.
We'd love to have him on the Patreon.
Yes. I even told the Twins official.
Or even on the free show, whatever.
I said he's going to make a great podcast guest someday. But
because we should mention we did have Thad Levine on earlier this year, who we went through this with back in October.
Yeah, we're like the real exit. We're the exit interview.
I love that.
For leaving the Twins organization.
But we've got plenty of good brewers we can take you to, Rocco. There's lots of good ones here locally. We'll take you to someplace. It'll be great. Yes.
We go out to Rhode Island.
We'll go out to Rhode Island for brewers.
We got a travel budget.
Sure.
So Falvey at least described it as a 2-hour meeting. He described it as amicable and friendly. And I mean, they are friends, or at least they have been friends. I don't know their current status, obviously. But he said it was sad. It wasn't yelling and screaming. It was more kind of reminiscing things that went well, things that went poorly. What could we have done differently? All that stuff. Which, one thing I will say about Falvey, and whether it's managers fired, players traded, coaches fired, scouts recently fired, these are not circumstances where the fired person tends to speak well of the person doing the firing a lot.
Sure.
I mean, that's
Sure.
just how it goes. I'm sure almost everybody listening to this has been fired at one point, and you don't come away from it going, boy, they were nice to me. However,
Right. Right.
I will say more often than not, when I have heard from people who have been in this situation and dealt with Falvey, he handles it professionally. He handles it as a good person. I have no doubts about that.
Yeah.
But he also kept saying it was a collective decision, which I thought was interesting within the context of him repeatedly saying, I take personal responsibility for the overall scope of the struggles. But about the firing specifically, he repeated several times it was a collective decision. And what I read from that, and again, you got to connect dots because they're not saying things that straightforwardly, is that it was ownership, if not driven, pushed by ownership. And that makes sense. That's not a surprise. I mean, we've
No.
speculated openly about that for 2 months now, which is, does ownership insist on a change? And if they do insist on a meaningful change, you're just sort of out of options other than Baldelli of what that can be. I mean, could you fire, I don't know, bench coach Jace Tingler and call it a day?
Sure.
I mean,
you don't.
could.
You need to check with ownership on that. Right.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, you could do that. That's sort of what they did last year. They fired the hitting coaches. But a second year in a row of that, I wouldn't call that meaningful change. And I'm certain that the majority of fans, given their level of frustration, would not call that meaningful change. So if ownership is saying we need change, we need something to change here, then it's Baldelli or bust, really, at that point. I mean, that's the last remaining shield or barrier or level of the hierarchy before the heat rises to the front office. And so I thought it was interesting that he emphasized that aspect of it, that it wasn't, yes, I'm the man doing the firing. Yes, I'm taking personal responsibility, but this firing was a collective decision. It made me kind of start to think on how that would have worked behind the scenes.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, it can also just be, listen, I think we need to make some change. We've had a tough one.
Right.
I've got ownership support on that, I don't know. You may know more behind the scenes than I do on that. So I have trouble reading into what that means or doesn't mean. I think we both agreed and we talked about it the night he was fired. Like, yes, he's being used as a shield. Like, yes, that has to happen, but you can make a case that he probably should have been fired. Like,
Right.
And that's nothing. That's not to say he's not a really good manager, or not to say that he isn't going to be a good manager someplace else. It might just be, this is a situation where nobody's going to do a particularly good job, but we've got to make a change someplace. And it might be that what I keep saying is, he's not the problem, but he wasn't the solution. Well, there might not be a solution. There might not be a manager you can bring in and that would have been able to raise the level of this team from, a team that can't compete even prior to the All-Star break to a team that can compete all the way and make it to the postseason. But he didn't, and I don't know. And whether you fire him or not, the pressure is going to be on Falvey next year. Like pressure on the team. Well, depending on how things go, could be on the front office in the upcoming year.
Well, you would think logically,
right?
you would think
right.
that.
And so we've got to. Well, we've got to try and make a change. We got to try doing something. The other phrase that was repeated over and over and over and over was different voice, which I think it was also used in the press release as well. Different voice, different voice, different voice.
And different direction. That was
and
another
different
thing
direction, right?
No, I agree with all you're saying. And I think, it's worth kind of prefacing this whole discussion with that for sure, which is, I do think the front office sort of held Baldelli up as a shield. You made him the sacrificial lamb. He takes the fall, however you want to phrase it. But the truth is, managers take the fall. That's part of the job.
Yes.
A lot of them will tell you, I get hired to get fired.
Right. Sure.
Like that's the job. You are high up in the food chain, but you are very crucially one level below the front office. And when the heat rises and the blame is being parsed out, you are the door that stops it from reaching the front office.
Right. That's right.
And so with that said, I think all that can be true. And also what you just described can be true. And I agree with largely what you're saying, which is, they missed the playoffs in 4 out of the last 5 years. And then beyond that, they had one of the worst second half collapses you will ever see last year. And then they followed it up with a 92 loss season this year. And it's also worth noting the horrible circumstances in which Baldelli was asked to win with.
Sure.
It starts 2 years ago when ownership slashes 30 million off the
Right.
payroll.
Yep.
Continues last offseason where they're only able to do kind of moves around the margins. It also extends to the front office not deciding to roll it back with the same core, which proved to be a real mistake when that core underwhelmed for a second straight season. And then at the trade deadline, when the Twins were pretty much out of contention, but actually had a better record than the Guardians, who ended up winning the division,
Right.
for whatever that's worth. I had no visions of them, making up 15 games and winning the division, but it's an interesting note.
It's funny, yeah.
They traded 40% of the roster, including Correa, including all the impending free agents, including basically the entire bullpen, which put Baldelli in a position where he was going to lose no matter what. There isn't a thing he could have done to not lose a whole bunch of games down the stretch. And in fact, Falvey was full of praise for the work that Baldelli and the coaching staff did down the stretch, and yet they still had the worst record in the American League, and I think it was the second worst second half record in the history of the Minnesota Twins. Those are all things that increase the degree of difficulty for Baldelli to a point that, as you said, it's possible nobody could have won under
Right.
these circumstances.
Right.
But you collapse 2 years in a row. You missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. A lot of managers don't make it out of that alive.
Sure.
And I don't think within the context of MLB as a whole that this is, an atypical firing, that this is a noteworthy firing. And I also think his fate was basically sealed at the deadline.
Yeah, I do too.
Because the moment they traded half the team and handed him a roster that was just bit players and spare parts and rookies and AAA guys who didn't even deserve to be in the majors and random 35-year-old relievers off waivers and all that, well, they knew they were going to be horrendous, and maybe they thought they'd win a couple more games or something like that. They knew they'd be horrendous, and then you get to the end of the season and you go, he's fired. But with that said, the firing itself, I think, is justified.
Yeah.
I think it was more of a 50-50 type of thing. I would have been kind of conflicted about what I would have done if put in that position. But if ownership even hints at the need for a change, then there's your 51% that you need to make this firing and justify this firing. However, my point, I guess, is, and we'll get to this after our first couple of sponsors here, the firing being justified should not take away from or mask or sort of eliminate the need to closely examine the front office's
100%.
performance.
Yeah,
And
I think we definitely see eye to eye on that.
But then you go up another level from that, and it's like, well, the Baldelli's performance shouldn't cause you not to look very closely at the front office's underwhelming performance.
Right.
And then the flip side to that is, well, the front office is working with the same type of limitations and really arguably even worse because they're dealing directly with ownership, which is slashing payroll, which is, horrible ownership at this point. And so what's the kind of degree of difficulty that they're dealing with too?
Yes.
My question there would be, well, if it's true that you just needed a new voice and a new direction in the dugout from a manager who's been there since 2019, what about a new voice and a new direction a level above him in the boardroom from a front office that has been there since 2017? And that's kind of...
I have a feeling a lot of what we're talking about right now, we're going to talk about potentially next year with the same sort of limitations being put on Falvey that were being put on Baldelli, and whether or not he deserves it or doesn't deserve it, or whether he's the problem or the solution or whatever. So let's get to that in a second here. But first,
let's talk about our presenting sponsor, Blackstack.
Blackstack was my biggest experience with Blackstack recently was that they catered or they provided the beer for my daughter's wedding. And
That's
Aaron,
right.
Aaron, you were at a table with a whole bunch of beer snobs drinking Blackstack beer. You weren't personally drinking Blackstack beer, I don't think.
I had one.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
But
I think it's the only beer I've had in 2025 is Blackstack. I think that's true.
Okay. Well, that's not the same for me, but what did the beer snobs think of the, let's see, the Metrodome Hazy IPA we had there, the local 755 IPA, the Slopes Pilsner that they had? Give me the feedback that you were hearing.
Here's how much they liked it. Two things. One, several of these beer snobs, I won't mention them, but had at least one of each type of beer.
Yes.
So they were like sampling the whole thing. But here's really what tells you how much they liked the Blackstack at the wedding. The only real complaint about the wedding that I heard from anyone was that the beer was too far away from our table. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
like,
And by the way, we set up a separate second bar with just the beer closer to your table.
right. But like, and people were coming back with like 8 of them in their hands, and
Yeah.
then they're like, "Man, I wish I didn't have to walk 50 feet to get to re-up this thing."
And this,
so the
this is
Black
because-
Stack was a hit.
Yes, the Black Stack is a hit because Black Stack brews great beer. They do. They also do like. They're also now distributing to everywhere, all over Minnesota, and now they've expanded to let's see, Iowa and Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, and even some nationally, like Arizona, Washington, soon Florida. I think their hazies or their IPAs are just exceptional. They're known for their and in fact, I think they've now started to release a new kind of specialty hazy on like a weekly basis. The one that was released just before the wedding is the Third Wheel IPA. We had 1 case of that. People loved that. That went fast. Metrodome Hazy was like 2-3 weeks earlier. That's my favorite IPA I've had this month. Sharper Image double IPA. We only got 4 of them because they're like 9%. I didn't want my whole wedding party to be smashed.
Well, you didn't really prevent that very well, but okay.
That's true. Yeah, the open bar probably didn't help with that. But I certainly didn't want an open bar with a 9% or 8% or whatever
Yes.
ABV.
And the beauty of Black Stack at this point is you can get it pretty much anywhere.
Yes.
Or you can go to their tap room,
Even
which has
better.
a
Right.
big old giant screen that they'll play sports on. You can hang out, which is what, 94 and 280, basically?
94 and 280. They're now, by the way, they want to call out, they're now serving Bloody Marys as a weekend special now, Friday through Sunday. And the best part about going at there now is that you can get a $2 off any 4-pack you buy there by mentioning Gleeman and the Geek. And by the way, we had friends from out of town go over to Black Stack Brewing and mention Gleeman and the Geek and get $2 off their 4-pack. They actually knew what they were talking about over there because they like Gleeman and the Geek. They like baseball. So ask for them at your local liquor store or enjoy a beer on tap at they have even a wider selection on tap at their tap room, and take a 4-pack home with you. Mention the code word Gleeman and the Geek for $2 off a 4-pack at their tap room.
Our second sponsor, longtime sponsor, and they actually just sent us a sample
Yes,
of the thing you guys can get,
that's right.
which is the set. And I always rave about it because it makes you feel like, I always say it makes you feel like Don Draper. It's like you're not just
Yes.
shaving anymore. It's like a fancy set. You got the
Yes.
shaved gel. You got the really good weighty handle on your 5-blade razor and all that stuff. And it's like they sent it to you. They sent one of each to us.
I'm
And I was
glad
like-
I got it too, because I didn't recognize. I don't know how long they've had this. We've been doing ads for them for like 12 years, 10 years, something like that. And I'm sure at some point this came across. Now they've got like a precision blade on the very top of the blade that you can have. Like, so beyond getting just a incredibly close shave, you can also now do specific stuff using the top of the. I didn't even know that tiny little blade was there, because that's the sort of thing and innovation that they have done since they started. That is what Harry's Razors is all about.
Yes. And for a limited time, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10. You just go to harrys.com/Gleeman. The set, here's what they sent us, which we both used.
Yep.
You get the all new Harry's Plus razor. You get the one refined 5-blade cartridge. You get a foaming shave gel and then a travel cover to protect it all when you're on the go. Just head to Harry's, HARRYS, harrys.com/Gleeman to claim the offer. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about him. Please support the show and tell them Gleeman and the Geek sent you. That's harrys.com/Gleeman to get that trial set. Okay. So the other thing from the Baldelli firing was, well, what's next? You know, there's going to be a new manager here at some point. And the interesting thing now is I believe they are one of now 8 teams.
Has that gotten up to 8 now?
Yeah, who have an opening. It's possible that could still grow at some point. I mean,
Right.
somebody from the playoffs could get fired, I suppose, or something like that. And so, you know, like many things, Falvey didn't really give too many hints of substance. You know, he was asked, you know, you looking for someone young, looking for someone old, looking for someone experienced? Are you looking for someone who's focused on next season? Are you looking for someone who's going to be, you know, what he basically wouldn't say a single thing. You know, are you looking for someone who breathes air? Well, I don't want to say that necessarily, but you know, I will say, and I know you had a little bit less of this takeaway. I came away from it and I was already kind of leaning towards this as their approach, because young and inexperienced also means cheap. It also means someone
Right.
who can be what they would call collaborative in terms of not being set in their ways and not having their own approach to things that can kind of blend more in with the organizational approach. I've thought since the firing that the next manager is more likely to be, what Baldelli was 7 years ago when they hired him, which
Right.
was mid 30s, somewhat recently retired player who had worked in scouting, who had worked in front office roles with the Rays. He had worked on the coaching staff with the Rays for several years, sort of a rising candidate, but a 30 something, or let's say even early 40 something. Whereas, there are a lot of other ways you can go with that. You can get just a straight up retread manager,
Yeah.
someone who maybe was that, got a job, struggled, got fired, and is now ready for a second chance. Or you can go a completely different way, which John has talked a lot more about on the Patreon side, which is you can go for like a 70-year-old guy who's managed World Series teams, who's won Manager of the Year multiple times, who might be going to the Hall of Fame or close to it. A Bruce Bochy, a Bob Melvin, Joe Madden.
Right.
There's tons of guys like this. I came away from the Falvey thing, and again, he certainly did not say much of substance.
No, he did not.
It's just all dots that I am attempting to connect here. But I came away more convinced than ever that that they will not be going in-house, that they will not be going with the, Bruce Bochy style, bring in a really proven guy who might only be there for 2 or 3 years. And, this is going to be young equals cheap, which also
Right.
probably goes to what they're looking for. But part of it was that when he was asked, and you might have even asked him this, Falvey was asked, what do you tell manager candidates about next year, about 2026, about
Yeah.
the payroll, about the approach of the team, about how this offseason is go, about do we think we can be competitive? What is sort of the expectation for a manager taking over this team that just lost 92 games, that just was the worst team in the American League for the last 2 months? Are you expecting them to win right away? And he didn't say yes or no on that, but what he did say was, we want a manager who's basically, this is paraphrasing, who's not focused on 2026. And
Right.
I get how he was phrasing that. He was saying, we want someone in it for the long haul.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
want someone who's going to come in and build with us.
Yeah, it
and
wasn't
look
clear
to-
he was saying 2026 doesn't count, right?
But he wasn't not
but he
saying
wasn't
that.
not saying that. That is
Yeah.
correct. Yes, and that's
And
a
s-
haunting
Yes.
reality right now, given some of the stuff we're hearing. So
Right. And so that made me and that's fine. I mean, look, we both think they're not going to be good next year, more likely than not.
yeah,
And so I don't think it's impossible. Like if they don't trade Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan and they spend a little bit of money on some bats and some bullpen guys, they could be competitive next year. Certainly. I'm not ruling that out. But if that's our feeling, then I'm sure a lot of manager candidates would have that feeling. And I also think, the less you're expecting to win next season or even in 2027, and I don't just mean having a winning record, but like really compete for playoff spots and playoff runs. Well, the less sense it makes to bring in someone who might be looking for their final job as a manager
Sure.
versus somebody who might be looking for their first or even second job as a manager. So I have no problem with that. I do think it's interesting. Like if you said to me, they're only looking for guys who are going to be in their first manager job, I'd go, okay, like that's fine. That's probably the pool that I would most be focusing on.
Well, I mean, so
anyway.
it's the pool they already jumped into, right? They already
Right.
jumped into it once. That's exactly who Rocco Baldelli was, and it would not be surprising if that's the way they went again. One of the reasons I thought they might not go that way again is just because that's where they went. And I don't think they were upset with how the Baldelli one turned out, but I just don't know if that's what you want to jump into again, given the state of this team. But
Right.
maybe, like if they really are kind of thinking, state of this team is we're probably not competing in 2026. We're kind of looking at 2027, 2028, 2029. We need to develop. We're taking a look at the AAA roster of Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez and Culpepper and some of those names, and as well as some of the young arms, developing Abel and Bradley and Festa and Matthews and Simeon Woods Richardson, etc.
Yeah, we know all the guys on the team, John. It's okay. You don't have to prove it.
I mean, they can easily take a look at that and go, next year's kind of a reloading / rebuild. Not a complete rebuild. We're not doing a complete tear down rebuild but maybe we're doing something close to it. And yeah, then a veteran manager doesn't really make sense necessarily.
And I'm fine with that. I think that is probably the right approach to take, or the best approach to take. But two things on that. One, if you are one of those rising coaches looking for your first job as manager, a lot of circumstances you take what's offered. But even with like Baldelli, I remember he had multiple teams interested in him. You're still choosing between offers once you get to be sort of a hot candidate, rising candidate. I wonder where the Twins stack up in that regard. But what I'll also say is, it's fine to say to a young manager, some 35-year-old third base coach or hitting coach or whatever that you're bringing in, hey, we're looking to be competitive next year, but realistically, we're looking 27, 28, 29. We're looking to build this thing along with you. We're looking at this as a 10-year thing. Well, that all sounds great in theory. But if it goes bad next year, are you certain that this front office is going to be around that hired you?
Yeah.
And if it's a new front office, are you certain that they're going to stick with the manager who got hired by the old front office and had a losing season in their debut season? And so I do think there's a lot more uncertainty within that could potentially thin their pool of candidates that view them as a not just viable option, but like a preferred option, let's say. And then you throw in the money aspect and all that. But yeah, I mean, that was, again, this is just us reading between the lines, but also Baldelli or Falvey wouldn't even answer questions about what traits he's looking for in a manager,
right?
Which I found because it's such a boilerplate thing. What are you looking for in the new manager? Well, I've never hired a new manager and I never will, but you know what? I can tell you, they want a guy who's going to focus on fundamentals. They want a guy who's going to be aggressive on the bases. They want a guy who's going to focus on player development. They want a guy, you can list off just the boilerplate things that any GM or front office guy in that spot is going to say. And he even kind of stopped short of doing that, other than saying, and I think this was kind of tied to the 2026 questions, we're looking for someone who's going to help develop a young roster, which again points me not to some 70-year-old who's been around the block, but some 37-year-old who's looking to get on the block, basically.
Yeah, it might very well be that the reason I was talking about an older manager or something like that is because I'm just of the opinion that they need. The biggest thing I feel like they need from this manager is a different voice in the room.
Which often happens, by the way.
Right.
When you, in any sport, in any context, whether it's a coach, manager, whatever, when you fire one guy, you often will have the next guy be, if not the opposite, certainly on the other side of the aisle from that guy. If you fire a young guy, you hire an old guy. If you fire an old guy, you hire a young guy. If you fire a new school guy, you hire an old school guy.
Right.
If you fire kind of a player's manager who's kind of laid back, you bring in a guy who's fire and brimstone. That has been the case forever across all sports. And so when you say in our heads, when we were talking Monday night before talking to Falvey and Zoll, just in the immediate aftermath of the firing announcement, it was like, well, what kind of traits might they want? Well, they might just swing to the other side and say, I want an experienced guy who's a little bit more fire and brimstone, who's a little bit more old school. And that's fine. But I don't think he said much to really indicate.
Yeah. And I mean, they kept saying different voice, different voice, different voice. Well, there's different voices in two different places, right? So a lot of what you're kind of talking about here is a different voice in the clubhouse, somebody that's going to be a different type of leader than what they have had in the clubhouse, right? And to that extent, if you want to bring in a young assistant coach that is, you think is really good at their job, but they've got a very different style than Baldelli, that's the sort of thing that could still provide a different voice in the clubhouse.
Right. Which also is part of why I don't think it'll be an in-house candidate, because that doesn't really check that box particularly well.
But I'm more interested in a different voice, pointing upwards, a different voice that is in the, decision-making room than what we have seen so far. And there you are much less likely to have a different voice if you are hiring somebody who is an assistant coach someplace else. That person is being brought in because they are aligned, right, with sort of what's going on. And they don't have the credibility, I guess, to go in there and be a challenging voice in sort of the decision-making areas of that room yet.
They don't have the resume. Right. They don't have the resume to say, no, we're going to do it my way.
Exactly right. Yeah. And how important is that? I feel like something has got to be shaken up right now in the leadership halls of Target Field, and this is a prime opportunity to do it. The truth is that yes, you're not the general manager, but the manager has about as much input as you can put into a lot of these decisions because ultimately they're the ones who have to deal with the decisions that are being made, right? And they can push back. They can say, I hate this decision. I don't want that person on my roster, or I'm not going to play that person the way you want me to play them. Like that's the way that's going to, we can be aligned on things, but I need to be able to have, we see differently on this sort of thing, and we need to be able to challenge that sort of, or, I don't appreciate how these guys are showing up at the major league level after what I have seen from them at the AAA level, or,
Right.
those are the sort of challenges that I feel we need to be hearing right now. And we did ask Falvey about that. He said he's wide open to voices, and I believe that he is wide open to a lot of different voices on that stuff. That he is looking for somebody that beyond sort of like a fundamental alignment is like, we sort of believe in developing our own players. We believe in youth. We understand the budget constraints, that sort of thing. That they're open to a bunch of different sorts of styles. But if you're hiring that kind of person, that person just isn't in a place to really do any sort of challenging at that level.
Right. Here's what I'll say. I agree with all that. I think that's all reasonable. I think that is a reasonable approach to take. However, I don't think they will take that. I don't think they value that sort of collaboration. I don't think they want, whether they say it or not,
Right.
I don't think they actually want someone to push back. They don't want someone with the resume to try to overrule them or push them towards things. And what you're really describing, though, and this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the show, what you're really describing is the need for new voices in the front office. And we know that's unlikely to happen. And so what you're saying is, I would like a manager who can check that box, a manager who can be a new voice in the front office, to which I say, that's asking a lot of a manager. In general, that's asking a lot of a manager, particularly with this front office, when I don't think they want that in a manager. It's really asking a lot for the front office. I remember talking to people who used to work in the analytics department for the Twins or even for other teams in the early days, 20 years ago. And what they said over and over was, we can do all the work and we can come up with the greatest data and the greatest recommendations for signings and trades. But if we give it to the front office and it is ignored literally or just, mostly, it doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think you can have a manager who has brilliant ideas.
By the way, we also heard the same thing about coaching staff kind of prior to Baldelli. Right. Yeah.
You can have a manager or even coaches who have brilliant ideas for trades they should do, waiver wire guys they should pick up, who should play, who shouldn't, who should be on the phone. You can have a guy who's a future great general manager, but he's in the dugout.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything if the ears are not open to hearing that in the front office. And I don't feel that's the case. I don't disagree with you that would be nice, but what you're really saying, I think, is, and this is what I'm saying, they need new voices in the front office.
Potentially.
And,
yeah.
and short of that, because that would actually be personal responsibility, changing the voices in the front office. Short of that, well, maybe we can get a manager who at least can get his foot in the door of the front office and maybe shout some good recommendations. Well, maybe, but also that's asking a lot, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also take it. I don't want to stop it at the front office, right? It's also up to the ownership level and the the C-suite where you're talking about. Which I'm not suggesting that that's something the manager can necessarily influence, or like, hey, you guys, hey, limited partners, we need to refocus on developing a championship team versus some short-term profit taking that you might want to take, right? But yeah, I do think that I am sort of ultimately taking a look at, listen, they need to get some new blood at I would think at the managerial level. Obviously, that's an obvious thing, but yeah, probably need to take a look at what are we doing even above that in terms of challenging some things. Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to do that. And then the last thing on this, like the new manager front, Falvey literally said, not only haven't they reached out to candidates yet, which is very plausible. I mean, the season's still going, but that they don't even have a list of candidates.
Yeah.
He said, that's one of those things you say, And either it's true, in which case, why the hell don't you have a list of candidates?
Right.
I got a list of candidates. And you
Right,
got a
yeah.
list. Like,
Right.
you've known this is coming. I mean, okay. Or it's not true, in which case, why say that? And that is a great example of kind of my frustration from this press conference overall, which is like even the most straightforward questions. Hey, have you talked to any candidates? No. Oh, well, do you have anybody in mind? You got a list? That we're not asking him to read the list. We're not asking him to say, is there 6 or 11 or 26 guys on the list?
Right.
Yeah, we have a list. We've been working on this. That would be reassuring on some level.
Yeah.
Why the hell wouldn't you have a list? I
Right.
mean, what? I see we're running low on Cheerios. I put that on the list. Like, this is a thing they've seen coming. And then the other thing that I think similar to that in terms of frustrating me, and I'm admittedly an easy person to frustrate in this regard, but I think it was Betsy Helfand asked Falvey at one point, you're saying you take responsibility, you're saying it went poorly and all that. What are some things you would have done differently this season? And he started his answer, very long answer. These are very long answers. I mean, we read one of them on the Patreon side. It was like damn near half the episode, just one answer. And he started it by saying, well, hey, I don't even have enough time here as we sit here today to name all the things I'd do differently. And then 4 uninterrupted minutes of talking later, he hadn't said one thing that he would do differently. And that is just what my takeaway from this thing sitting there for 52 minutes is like. I don't know whether it's intentionally sort of talking around things or if he has the impression that he is being forthcoming, which is really strange to me. Because if you sit there and go, I don't even have enough time to get into it. And at the end of it, it's like, name one.
He is aware of the, traps, the things that can turn into a media trap. Like, for instance, the moment he says, well, for instance, to your personal accountability thing, right? The moment he says, I'm failing, this is at least partly my failure, maybe even mostly my failure, but we've got to make a different change. We've got to make a change. And I'm the one responsible for making that change. And I'm going to try this thing. And that thing is going to be firing a manager that I think doesn't necessarily even need to be fired.
Right.
Well, as soon as he says that, for the next 18 months, or as long as he's got that job, he gets to hear Falvey's even admit himself he's a failure. Blah, 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 blah. Right?
I get all that.
Over and over and over.
Then
right?
Don't bring up personal responsibility over and over and over again. I didn't win a charity auction to make him say a line.
Well,
do you know what I mean? I didn't put that. He chose to not only write it, but then say it 5 times the next day.
What he's trying to say is that without saying that, right? Which I give him credit for. And the one we were just talking about that I also
what would you have done differently?
What would you have done differently? I mean,
is that a hard thing to say? Is that, hey, I wish I would have maybe made some more trades last offseason. I wish I would have made more coaching changes. I wish I would have approached the offseason. I mean, we're not asking for specifics in any of these. We're just asking for real answers. And that is apparently too much to ask for in this spot. Before we talk about some ownership payroll side of this thing, let's talk about our next couple sponsors, one of which is Prize Picks. Yeah, John has apparently gotten rich off of a little of that.
I'm not doing so well in our fantasy football stuff. I'm doing fine. I'm like 50-50 in my fantasy football leagues. But my fantasy Prize Picks stuff is hitting pretty well lately. And October is a great, great time to be playing any kind of fantasy sports, to just peruse them. There's so much stuff out there, I can't even find it all. But you got the WNBA, you've got Major League Baseball playoffs. We got Ohtani starting versus the Phillies tomorrow. How many? You think he's going to get 6 strikeouts? You think he's going to get more strikeouts, less strikeouts? Well,
that's all you got to pick.
Yeah, that's what they have to do on Prize Pick. The way it works is
they have lines for more or less on all kinds of stats and fantasy type stuff for players, and you can even go across sports if you want. I've done that.
College football, NFL football.
You just look and you say, I think this guy will have more or less than 1 hit today, and I think this guy will have more than 1 RBI.
You pick like 2 or 3. You pick 2 or 3 of them. That's called a lineup. Like it's basically, I think Ohtani's going to have more than 6 strikeouts. I think Bryce Harper is going to have more than 1.5 hits. Whatever you think that you're going to be doing, right? And you put them into a lineup. You can do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And then you can even say like, okay, I picked these 3. I'll get this payout if all 3 hit, but I'll get these payout if just 2 of the 3 hit. Something like that. So, I mean, there's so much flexibility.
And they will
it's
occasionally,
so easy to use.
by the way, give you like a free square, basically.
Yeah, right.
Like once in a while, once a week or something, it'll pop up and it'll say like Patrick Mahomes more or less than 0.5 yards, which is basically just a free square that you can kind of add to your lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code Gleeman, and you get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So that's the code Gleeman, Gleeman, on the Prize Picks app to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And our last sponsor for today is Raycon.
Yeah.
And I was using these the other day, actually.
I bet you were. Yeah.
I was using these to
You know why? Because they're called
transcribe.
everyday earbuds. That's why.
I was using them to transcribe our 52 minutes of Derek Falvey audio afterwards, which is
Good.
Which is perhaps why I'm a little sensitive to someone talking a lot and not saying that much, because you have to transcribe the talking a lot aspects. But here's how Raycon works. It's Raycon. Raycon are earbuds, and they're as good or better than a lot of pricier models.
Yes.
And we've been using them for years. John uses them to go running because of the actual like physical fit in his ear he likes. I love using them to do stuff around the house or to do work stuff because they're super easy to pair up with Bluetooth. They have a super long battery life, both of which I just can wear them all day. Yep. I wear them at the ballpark sometimes for a whole game, and they don't die on you. And the real beauty of it is the price point.
Right.
You save money compared to, other name brands and stuff. Raycon we've used for a long time. I give them to my mom every year for a gift because she loves to go walking and wearing them.
Yep.
John's using them all the time.
Chrissy uses them too. Yep.
Yeah, and you can get 20% off their everyday earbuds just by going to buyraycon. That's BUYRAYCON. Buyraycon.com/Gleeman, and they will give you 20% off the everyday earbuds classic. There we go.
Yep.
Buyraycon.com/Gleeman. Yep. Okay. Let's see. We talked about the Baldelli stuff. The other main topic, I guess, from the Falvey/Zoll media session was, I should also note, finally, he fessed up to picking up Baldelli's option 6 months ago.
Well, we don't even know when, but he said going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, it was this spring, early in the season, something like that.
It was reported in June or July, but we don't think it happened in June or July. We think, and they didn't say when exactly they picked up. I think it might have been before spring training. We just didn't hear about it because they won't report this stuff. Right.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you just publicly say we picked up the option in our manager?
Right.
Oh, it's team policy. We don't get into that. Well, you made the team. I mean, what do you mean team policy? It's my team policy that you tell me. So yeah, they finally fessed up to that. Team policy is funny coming from the team president, by the way.
Right. Yes. Right. Yes.
You get to set the team policy. So, they finally fessed up. So from Baldelli's standpoint, he gets paid. He could, if he wants to get right back in baseball and he wants to try for a manager job or a bench coach job or something like that, or a front office gig, he's welcome to do that. If he just wants to sit on his butt in Rhode Island and hang out with his 3 kids and his wife and his dog, that's cool too, because the checks are going to be coming every 2 weeks.
Right. Good time to hang out with the kids. A nice, good age for that right now.
Yeah. Although, if I had to hang out with 3 little kids, I might be looking for some kind of job.
Well, you can occasionally get to the tap room. You don't have to take a job.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. And look, we pay our guests on this podcast, Rocco. So if you need a little bit more income,
there you go.
And also a reason to get out of the house for like a couple of hours or a lot of hours, Gleeman the Geek, we'll set it up.
We're good with tap rooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
We started with tap rooms. Yeah.
We'll pay you to come on the show and we'll cover the tab.
Yeah.
That could be dangerous with you and him together. That could be.
We'll get some lobster rolls. It'll be great.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not covering lobster rolls. Come on now. I'm not made of money. As my grandpa used to say. What am I made? What do I have, a money tree in the backyard? My grandpa used to say that to me too. Okay. So speaking of money, the other big topic that Falvey was asked about repeatedly, because no poll ads were in attendance, obviously, were questions about the ownership situation, questions about the direction of the team, but specifically the payroll. He dodged all that payroll stuff. What he did say,
the custom answer was, I've got to talk to ownership. I've got to talk to ownership. I've got to talk to ownership.
Now, we've been around long enough and we've attended enough of these sessions specifically with Falvey for 5 years or 8 years or whatever it's been to know that there was a time when they were sort of proud of their payroll, when it
Yeah.
was 160 million and that ranked 16th out of 30, let's say in 2023, where they wouldn't give you a specific number, but they would say, you
Yeah,
know,
we expected an increase in payroll. Like, yeah,
or
right.
they would also say, well, our ownership, the poll ads are great. When we come to them and we want to make additions, they always support adding to the team. They always support, if they think it's a good idea. But 2 years ago, that noticeably changed kind of the wording around the payroll. And it became at one point, well, I'll have a chance to kind of make my pitch for payroll to the poll ads and they'll decide what it is. And then it became, and is probably right now, well, I hope I get a chance to make that pitch to the poll ads
Right.
on the importance of maintaining a somewhat reasonable payroll. It wasn't, and this probably gets to John's feeling of just sort of overall malaise as it relates to the outlook of the team going forward, which is it was hard not to come away from that assuming payroll is going to go down again.
Yeah.
And, they're at roughly 90 something million as a baseline. If you take the guarantees,
Yeah,
the
90,
arbitration.
95 million, something like that. And that's it. That basically, when we say by a baseline, what we mean is that if they're bringing back all of the players that they should bring back and they get the arbitration raises they should be getting, et cetera. And we're talking about by bringing back the players, what I mean is like the team that you saw in September that they have, that aren't free agents, that aren't,
Yeah. I mean, Joe Ryan is arbitration eligible. Ryan Jeffers is arbitration eligible. These are not guaranteed salaries, but you'd keep these players because they're still underpaid relative to their salaries.
That's right. And you can kind of estimate, even though their exact salary hasn't been determined, you got a pretty good idea within $1 million one way or the other. So sort of the back of the napkin figuring gets this team as just returning what we saw in August and September at about $95 million.
Right. And so a couple things about that. One, like I said, 2023, they were at 160 something million as a payroll.
Right.
They then cut to like 130 something in 2024. This year started around 140, and then obviously the trade deadline cuts got it to below 130.
Ultimately, they were probably closer to one. They were closer to 120 million spent in payroll this year.
Right.
If they wouldn't have gone through a trade deadline where they slashed a bunch of salaries, they would have been at about 140. But they did, and so therefore they actually, I think, payroll this year came in $10 million less than last year.
Right. They're at like 90 something now as like a baseline.
Right.
They only have two guaranteed salaries. They have Pablo Lopez at 21.5 million, and they have Byron Buxton at 15 million. Now, 95 million would have ranked 26 out of 30 this year. But the other thing to remember, and that's pretty bad. I mean, that's no team ranked that low made the playoffs, obviously. The other thing to remember, though, is even the 160 in 2023 would not be 160 today because payrolls tend to rise roughly 5 to 10%,
right,
or maybe 5 to 8%, something like that, year over year in a normal circumstance, not affected by COVID, not affected by the lockout, although that is potentially coming. But so if you take the 160 in 2023 and you just have it rise along with the rest of the league, you're looking at 180,
190, yeah,
something like that. Which, by the way, this year, $180 million payroll would have ranked 15th. It would have been exactly average. So that kind of matches what we're saying.
Which means, and it's going to go up for next year.
Right, obviously.
That'll be 190 next year.
And so even maintaining kind of a $125 million payroll, which is where they ended this season roughly, would put you like 60 million below average at that point. And it's, 35 million below where you were 3 years ago. But it's also would have grown from that. I think we both have a great deal of skepticism that they'll even be at the level they've been at the last 2 years, because that would require from
Aaron, I'll take the under on 100.
Really? Ooh, your skepticism has gone past which is never a good sign with the two of us, John.
No, that's not a good sign.
Ooh, that's a bad sign, because
I will take the over under at 100, and I will take the under.
Really? Yeah, I'm not saying no on that, but that's bad coming from you.
Yeah.
So, because I think like a month and a half ago, I probably said it'll be lower than it was like this season, and you might have put up a little bit.
I did. I was like, there's no reason for them to go below like 125 that they had this year. That makes no sense.
But you're applying reason to an unreasonable situation, I think is what you figured out.
Yeah,
but on that point though, if they're at roughly 90, let's call it 95 as a baseline heading into the offseason without moving anybody, to get back to 125, 130, which they've been, let alone 140, which they began this season with, you got to
Right.
go spend $40 million on players. And
Right.
I'm not acting like that's amazing, but I just don't see them doing that.
I mean,
Like,
that's adding some significant firepower.
right.
Like you
Now,
could add, several, decent relievers to get your bullpen restarted,
a couple big
and a
bats.
couple of big bats, and that puts you to the point where, well, maybe we're actually competing for a wild card again.
Right.
That's
I agree with that. Like if you
Right.
take this current roster, as bad as it looked in September or in August and September, and you set it at 95 million, you make a couple of trades maybe to address some things, or you cut a guy or two, and you go spend, whether it's bringing in guys with salaries and trades or just on free agents, you go spend another 40 million to bring you up to like 130 roughly,
Right.
which is where you've been, and it's still going to be 50, 60 below average across Major League Baseball. I do think that's a team that can contend. Now, you still have to spend that money wisely.
Sure.
It's not just the money itself. But again, if you go add a couple of relievers, you add some depth, you add a couple of a DH and a first baseman who can pop 30 homers, something like that. These are not necessarily the most expensive aisles to be shopping in.
Yeah.
If you do that, you can absolutely win 80-something games and compete, if not for the wild card, or not, if not for the division, at least for the wild card.
Well, just so we're clear, wild card was 86 wins, right? And well, the division was 87.
Yeah.
And
over
you are in the right division to be competing for a division title at that point. Yeah.
over in the NL, the last wild card was 83.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, 85 tends to get you, pretty good position in these with the expanded playoffs. But I just have so much difficulty envisioning what that would even look like from them at this point. But then beyond that, I asked Falvey straight up after he had mentioned, because he tended to talk about Buxton and talk about the young starting pitchers and he mentioned Austin Martin like 8 times, which is a bad sign when that's one of the, shining lights that you're going to put forth. Not that Austin Martin didn't play okay down the stretch.
Great.
You're talking about a bench player, basically.
Very happy for him. Yeah.
Yes. But he was grasping at straws to kind of position, we have this core that we're going to build around. And every time he mentioned Austin Martin, I was like, this is a bad spot to be in. No offense to Austin Martin. I apologize. But he also clearly mentioned several times right off the bat, Lopez and Ryan and Bailey Ober as a core of a starting rotation that can be very good. And so after hearing that 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times, I said, as you sit here today, do you envision Lopez and Ryan being more likely than not to be on next year's team? And that just means 51% more likely than not. And he said, it's my hope that that's the case.
Right.
And what he also said, going back to the ownership stuff, was, I hope to I have to wait to hear from ownership what the approach is going to be.
Again,
to
determine
that.
ownership. Yeah.
And here's where that gets crazy to me, or that gets depressing if you're a Twins fan. We just said they're at 95 million as a baseline, and that includes keeping Lopez and Ryan. So if you're needing to hear from ownership that you can keep a core together that is only expected to make 95 million, and you need to get approval basically from them or direction from them to keep Lopez, who's at 21.5, and Ryan, who will probably make 8 to 10 in arbitration. If you can't just say yes on that and you need to hear from ownership, that's needing to hear from ownership that you might have like $110 million payroll or $105 million payroll. And so again, these are reading between the lines, but they're the ones saying these lines. So I took that as a pretty bad, I mean, I've said many, many times, I know fans of Lopez and Ryan get frustrated that I keep saying this, but I think they're going to be traded. I mean, I've thought that since the deadline. I certainly didn't come away from this more. Him saying I'm hopeful that that's the case, I believe that. I certainly believe he would like to put a team on the field next year. Falvey would, that has those guys atop the rotation. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.
But if he's given, like you said, a payroll under 100 million, it's not really viable. And then beyond that, if he just doesn't think they're going to win, or he's committed to doing another, like a wider scale rebuild, well, those are the guys that have the most trade value too. Right. And they also clear 30 million or so off the books. But
I mean, and if they do end up with a, $90 million payroll, right? Even what we're kind of talking about. Yeah. Well, if they want to make any moves at all, if they want to fill some gaps that they clearly have, if they want to pick up a first baseman, like if they want to do anything that they want to do, they're going to have to free up some payroll sometime. We saw this 2 years ago. 2 years ago, all they really had for a hole was first base. And they wanted to get Carlos Santana for $6 million. And to do that, they had to trade away Jorge Polanco at $10 million and pick up $4 million worth of Sclafani for it. DeSclafani for it. And then as a result of it, And then that's how they freed up $6 million to end up getting Santana. So
Right.
you almost, even if the payroll is as high as $100 million, which I'm starting to really doubt, you probably still maybe have to trade one of those guys, or you have to trade Jeffers, or you have. I mean, you've got to free up some money someplace to be able to
Right.
pick up anything because you're going to have some things you're going to need to pick up. You can't just roll
But
from
here's the
one
thing.
season to the next.
Let me throw this back at you. I agree with
Okay,
that.
good.
First of all, I'm not. I don't know that this has ever occurred in the 15-year history of this podcast. I'm not as pessimistic about the payroll being under 100 million. I certainly am not ruling that out.
Okay.
I think it's more likely to be 110, 115. I mean, but similar. But here's what I'll say. If it is like $100 million payroll and they just literally have no room to do anything, well, it wouldn't make sense to trade, let's say, Joe Ryan to clear $10 million to bring in some mediocre first baseman. Because the moment you trade Joe Ryan and your payroll is $100 million, you're not going to be a good team
Right.
in 2026 anyway. What do you need a veteran first baseman
Mediocre
for?
first baseman,
Right?
I mean, I'm with you. I understand that point, but you're going to get some assets back for Joe Ryan, right? You're going to get some prospects back for him, and you've got Simeon Woods Richardson to step into a spot or something. Like I'm not saying that you no, listen. I'm not saying Simeon Woods Richardson replaces Joe Ryan. Listen, do I think that makes the team worse? Oh yeah, that makes the team worse, right? But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they.
I guess what I'm saying,
and that's assuming that they keep it at 95, 100 million as opposed to 80 million. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're at 80 million, we're back in the Metrodome basically. I mean, they're already at that level of spending. I've talked about that before.
Right.
He did confirm that the limited partners, minority partners, whatever you want to call it, that's still all systems go from his end.
We know, right?
Yeah. We've said it's probably the names are likely to be known after the World Series because that's when they have to get voted in by the league. There's the, league meetings basically.
The owner meetings are the third week of November, November 19th to the 21st. So certainly we would think by then we would find out.
Yeah, if not before. I mean, it could be before. The other interesting thing on that front that he said, and this was one of the weirder moments of the entire hour-long session for me. I think you probably agree.
Yes. Oh.
He was asked about some business stuff and kind of like how his approach has changed because he's basically completing his first year running the business side after taking over Dave St. Peter's role during the first quarter of this year officially. I think it was during spring training, like March. And the premise was at the time, Falvey had been running the baseball ops. He was going to also run the business ops. Dave St. Peter was retiring from the Twins or stepping away from the Twins. There was going to be a transition period. And one of the things that they talked about at the time was, well, St. Peter will help the transition process of the sale to a new owner. He wants to kind of be part of it, which makes sense. And he can be part of the handoff to the new owner. And then he can ride off into the sunset and Falvey or whoever can run things. Well, the problem with that is that went on for 10 months and then they took the team off the market. So there was no handoff to a new owner. And Falvey got real weird, I thought, and was laughing a little bit when it was almost like a nervousness or somethingness when he was asked about this. But what he ultimately said was that Dave St. Peter remains very involved on the business side of things. And this is basically 1 year after his announced exit.
And then it's not totally clear what his future looks like on the business side.
His being Falvey. Well, I guess
yes, right.
You could say.
Right. I mean, in part because of the new minority ownership. Or at least he referenced that. He says, obviously, there's limited partners involved in the conversation with the Pohlads. Okay, so, I mean, the whole thing made us feel like it feels like the leadership of this organization, certainly from the business side, but actually throughout, is just sort of, we're not really sure what the leadership looks like at this point, which is a perfect reflection of what we've seen for the last 2 years from this organization. It just feels like there's a lack of leadership at the top, and as a result, and there's only so much pushing you can do as a manager underneath that leadership to actually get things to move or to move one way to try to thrive rather than survive, as Thad Levine said in our interview with him a couple of right. That you can only push so much on leadership, saying, "Hey, what am I doing here? What am I here for?" And yeah, that definitely kind of came through on that weird answer about the business side stuff. I'm not sure we know what his role is. I'm not sure he knows what his role is going to be by December,
Yeah, I mean,
when
we
minority leadership comes
we
in here.
talk a lot about the bad ownership, and there's a lot of domino effects from that are very obvious. There's also a lot of like little tentacles, little tree branches from that, where the effect can be felt, but it's not like obvious. And what I mean by that is, well, slash and payroll is obvious. We can put a number
Sure.
on it. They
Right.
spent 160 one year, then the next year they spent 130. Well, that's an effect of bad ownership, or not investing. But the other thing is, as far as leadership, you create a situation where, are you selling the team? Aren't you selling the team? Are you willing to invest in the team in the meantime? Are you not? Are these new people coming in going to be in charge of stuff, or are they just pure money being injected into it? There's so many angles to this, and what you end up with, I think, is you get these little branches from the ownership being bad tree, and it kind of poisons everything. And then it's like, well, nobody knows what their job is. Nobody knows what the direction of the team is. Nobody knows what the payroll is going to be. Nobody knows, are the new owners going to come in and actually have a voice or not? Are they going to want to change the front office? Are they going to want somebody new on the business side? There's so much uncertainty, and that's not even on the field. That's just
Right.
all off the field, business side, front office side. And I think that is the direct result. It starts at the top and the S rolls downhill, right? I mean, it's all the uncertainty at the top, the lack of investment at the top, the lack of leadership at the top, and then it gets to the front office
Well,
level
and
and you
then,
start.
and then also just sort of the mess they made at the top. I mean, when you've
Well,
got
right.
$500 million worth of loans against your $1.5 billion asset, that speaks to a level of mismanagement
Right.
at that level that, is not as a result of the people that run that business. That is a result of the ownership of that business. Like that, I assure you, Dave St. Peter didn't get $500 million worth of loans against that thing. Like that's just crazy, right? That is a mismanagement up there that if you are trying to lead the business and you've got that sort of thing hanging over your head, as well as the ownership that did that hanging over your head and overseeing you, you're just in a bad position. Like I think most people know what it's like, how bad it is in a job to not trust your manager, to not trust the manager of the company that you're working, either from a moral standpoint, like they're just not a good person, or from a competency standpoint, like you just don't know that they're doing a good job, or they're always looking out for themselves and not necessarily for their people or anything. Like you feel trapped in that role, right? And now I feel as a fan, kind of, and I think Twins fans are reflecting that in their frustration towards the team. And I think it's fair to suggest that the people underneath that ownership are feeling that
Absolutely.
same level of frustration directly upstairs. Like from there on, it doesn't matter. If you can't get that right at even a basic level, you can't give your people some ability to go and do things and some idea of the direction. And it's not just, oh, we're just going to profit take and cut payroll and all this other stuff. All you're doing is hanging on. You're just waiting for that to change, and now we know that's not going to change unless we get some weird change with this owners, with these new owners. And I'm not.
We talked at the beginning when we were talking about Baldelli about like how that sort of domino effect of ownership impacts the baseball side of things, right? Like we talked about, well, okay, it's justified to fire Baldelli because of the losing and because of where the team has been the last 4 or 5 years. But it's also fair to say he was working with his hands tied behind his back,
right? Yeah.
Because the front office didn't invest in the team. The roster he was given didn't work. The player development, which is not his job in terms of minor leagues and getting guys ready, coaching them up, that's not a manager's job. It failed on every possible level to the point that he just had a roster that the good guys weren't performing or they were injured. Then you go up a level and it's like, well, okay, the front office was responsible for his roster. So now you start to look at them, which I certainly am writing and talking about. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, they had limited resources, but they also decided not to break up the core last year. And then the same core, they didn't do this. They haven't made trades. Some of their draft picks and some of their moves haven't been good, and on and on and on. That's all true. And that's why I question sort of the personal responsibility aspect. But then go above them. Well, they're working with their hands tied behind their back too.
Of course.
Because ownership / payroll ownership won't give them direction. Ownership just has all sorts of flaws that are not
Right. They don't
exclusive-
even know who the ownership is, what the ownership's going to look like in
Correct.
another year. Right?
And that's just
Or
the
another 2 months.
And that's just the baseball side of things. It stands to reason then, while we're not as focused on or knowledgeable about or interested in even the business half of the team, it stands to reason that there's the same domino effect and the same difficulties and the same trying to do things successfully with your hands tied behind your back on the business side. I will note that Falvey was asked a couple of business specific questions that even like prefaced it by saying, hey, put your business hat on.
Right.
One of which was like, how are you going to get fans back when they're so mad at you? And he basically said, well, winning will do that, which is absolutely true.
Right.
But then there was a follow-up question that said, okay, yeah, but that's baseball. I want business. How are you working behind the scenes on the business side, game day experience, ticket sales, whatever it is, to win back or entice to even buy tickets? And I don't think he had an answer at all for that.
I mean, that's, yeah.
He basically said, we're going to try to win, which absolutely. But they've been trying to win.
Lean into target field. Right.
That's what he said over and over.
Basically,
And
right.
I'm going to tell you right now that I've heard from some people, and I've started to see it with my own eyes.
Sure.
They are, I believe, going to lean extremely hard into the target field's beautiful, watching baseball.
So is summer in Minnesota. Yeah, right.
All that. And look, that's true. I love target field.
That's what I would do. Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly
However,
right.
When you say to the guy who runs the whole team, what are you going to do to get back fans? And he says basically two things. One, we're going to try to win. Well, you've been trying to win. That's not a change. And two, well, it's a great place to watch baseball. Brother, it's been a great place to watch baseball. And the people who are paying money to come watch it plummeted this season to the lowest it's been in 25 years. And so to say we're going to try to win, and also this is a great ballpark, that's been true since 2010. And you haven't been able to do it. And he didn't say, he said, you know, we think we do a great job with ballpark operations and game day. I'm not disputing that at all. Those people work hard.
Yep.
But you've been trying that. And he didn't really express anything new. And one other thing I'll say is they scheduled this for Tuesday at 10 a.m. We didn't burst down the door to the C-suite offices at One Twins Way and demand to ask 52 minutes of questions. They scheduled this out. They could have chosen when and where to do it. They could have chosen the context to do it in. And you got to think, a lot of these questions you knew were coming, right?
Yeah.
One of which, how are you going to win back angry fans? Is that a shocker to the team president to hear that question and to not be able to point to one thing other than we're going to win and it's lovely ballpark?
Well, on top of that, I mean, I concur 100% with that. I'll also mention, you've known for 2 months that you may be having a managerial change. Don't tell us you don't have a list of candidates. Don't tell us you don't have any trades that you've been thinking about. You've known for 2 months what your roster is going to look like going into the offseason. You've known for almost 2 months what the ownership situation looks like above you, that you're not going to be on the market, that you're bringing in some minority investors, et cetera. Like all of this stuff is, you've had 2 months to work through this stuff. So either, I mean, tell us what you know, and if you don't have 100%, I can't be 100% sure what payroll is going to be because I haven't had the final meeting with so-and-so. Well, then at least prep us with, well, we're not sure that we're really going to be able to compete. And if we're not really sure we're going to be able to compete, we're not sure that it makes like at some point you've just got to start delivering the message. The most frustrating part around the dancing around on this is that if there's messages to be delivered, then deliver the damn message. Because we're gonna find out we're gonna find out that Rocco Baldelli was extended for the 2026 season in July, and why not announce that in February when you do it, right? We're gonna find out in November whether what your true payroll looks like. Like that's going to happen at sometime during this offseason, and certainly by the middle of March, we're going to know what the payroll is for your opening day roster. You know what the opening day roster. You know where you're shopping. You know which aisle you're shopping in.
No, they treat everything as a state secret, which
it seems
that
silly.
has become prevalent in sports. But guess what? Y'all are a losing baseball team with a fan base that's shrunk over and over. couldn't be madder. The season ticket base has shrunk. The attendance is the worst it's been in 25 years. You missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. You just had the worst team in the American League. Like,
You're
what?
supposedly working overtime with your announcing team and so on to create educated baseball fans in this
Right.
market, and here we have educated baseball fans hungry for some information on what you are doing or not doing here.
Yeah.
And
Here's the other thing I'll say on that. When it suits them over the past several years, they play up the idea that Joe Polad has an office at Target Field and he's there every day. It's right by Falvey's office. They always say it. You've heard it written, you've heard it said. When it suits them to portray the collaborative nature of the owner being hands-on and being able to, if Falvey wants to pick up a player, he walks across the hall and he has a conversation with Joe Polad. When it suits them for that to be the narrative, they repeat it and they give it to the press and they talk about it and everything. And then when you say, hey, what's the direction of the team for next year? He goes, well, I haven't talked to ownership about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, do you lock himself in his office the last 60 days? What's going on? And so that's another thing. Like, don't pee on me and tell me it's
This
raining.
is an absentee ownership. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it is, but
it also just the nature of everybody wants to be Bill Belichick or Greg Popovich, where they're keeping state secrets. That was probably annoying to cover for Patriots and Spurs reporters and fans and stuff. But guess what? You could do it when you're winning a championship, 6 times in 10
we
years.
don't need
or whatever.
to know. We don't need to know the recipe when we like the food.
Right. The recipe for the worst restaurant in town is not a state secret. Like what? How about him
when we're eating the food and it sucks, we want to know what you put in it. Right. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, I feel like I've jokerized John again on this topic, but okay. Let's run through at the very end here some sort of miscellaneous stuff from the end of the season, the press conference, and all that. A couple injury updates. Luke Keeschel indeed tore a ligament in his thumb on the slide during the last road trip. He is either had or is about to have surgery.
I think he had it already. He was supposed to have it the next day. He was supposed to have it Tuesday, or Wednesday.
The expectation, this is according to Jeremy Zoll, is that he'll be ready for spring training. It's the exact injury that Alan Roden, the corner outfielder they acquired from the Blue Jays in the Louis Varland trade, and then he injured it in August and missed the end of the season.
About a week and a half later, right?
Yeah. It's the exact injury. He has the expectation is also that he'll be there. I actually saw him at the press conference because now he lives in Minnesota. I'll make the same joke I made on the Patreon. He's from Wisconsin, and you gave him 3 weeks in Minnesota, and he thought, I'm going to live here now.
There you go.
Yeah, which is a very
much
common
better
thing.
beer here. You're going to love it, Alan.
Yeah. So the expectation is that they'll be ready for spring training. Obviously, with Keeschel, that's his 3rd major injury in 13 months. He had Tommy John elbow surgery last August. Then he broke his right forearm in April, missed 3 months, and now he's got a torn ligament in his thumb. Not a great start for a 23-year-old. I asked Zoll about Bailey Ober, and he basically said he doesn't need a procedure to fix what ails him physically, and that rest and rehab, they hope, will do the trick. And the expectation is that after a full, strong offseason, he should be ready to go in spring training. I would love that to be the case for the Twins and for Bailey Ober, but we saw him struggle so consistently, physically, velocity-wise, giving up homers wise, everything, struggling to throw 90 miles an hour consistently for months, even after taking all of July off, by the way, that I just wonder, like, what is, I would love it to be true, 4 months off instead of 1 month off. Maybe that does the trick, but it just seems like something that's more significant than rest and rehab, but we'll see. And the other thing on the pitching front is that David Festa got a good report from the specialist in Dallas during the road trip for his thoracic outlet syndrome. He received Botox injections to kind of untrap the nerve in his shoulder or arm area, and I believe someone said 4 to 6 weeks of no throw, and then hopefully be able to have a somewhat normal off season with an expectation that he could be ready for spring training. That's incredibly good news compared to the potential that he would need surgery for thoracic outlet, which we've talked about in past episode. One of the worst surgeries that a pitcher can really have, period. But we'll see how it goes.
If
Not
you
out
want
of
to
the
read more
woods,
about
but
that, by the way, Lucas Seehaver has a great story on sort of what Botox and thoracic outlet syndrome, how it works, and what the rehab process looks like for that on Twins Daily. So check that out today.
do you think we should just get Botox for our faces?
We should get Botox for a lot of things. Yeah,
Is it too
probably.
late? Is it too late in the game?
I'm if they really drop their payroll to $80 million, I'm going to just throw the Botox right into my heart.
Okay. Well, geez, John, buddy. I feel like we'd go for Botox because I think you do it like your eyes or your head. We'd go in and they'd go, save your money.
That's right.
Like, we don't want to take your money.
How about we're just going to give you a Botox cream. You
How
just put
about,
it all over
have you thought about just buying a bunch of brown paper bags and putting them over your heads for the podcast? That would be much cheaper, better for the environment. A couple other things. They officially finished number 2 in the draft lottery odds
Oh,
because the Rockies and the Nationals, who had a worse record than them, are ineligible for the lottery this year because they've been in it too many times in past years. So the White Sox have the number 1 lottery odds, and the lotteries held first week of December during the winter meetings. That would probably be on MLB TV. I was there for 3 of them, and they were on 2 of them, and they were on MLB
right.
TV. It's not the greatest live event to attend. It's just a bunch of writers just waiting so they can file their stories basically
Right.
on what happened to their team. But so the Twins are number 2. What that means is they have like a 21 or 22% chance of getting the number 1 pick. It also means the lowest they could pick is number 8. Like the furthest they could possibly drop is number 8. I think they're basically 50-50 then to have a top 3 pick at that point.
Okay.
So this is all positive. It's it's still a long way. I mean, a year out from the draft or whatever this is, 8 months out from the draft, it's particularly tricky in baseball because a lot of times you're dealing with guys who are currently 16 or 17 years old.
Right.
And a lot can change in a year.
Right.
I was a good
Especially
kid.
when you're 16 or 17
Yeah.
years old. Yeah.
I was a good kid at 16, and by 17, my mom was ready to get rid of me at that point. You know what I mean? But in general, considered a better draft class than this year's class, at least momentarily. And the number 1 pick, which is a UCLA shortstop, I think his name is Rock, which is going to be sad if they get a guy named Rock after firing
that'd be
Rocco.
a shame, right? Yeah.
But he's viewed as like a premium, future star type of guy.
Okay.
So winning the lottery would change the, if you're able to win the lottery and get, a great college player who presumably could be ready very, very quickly, and you have like a
right.
1 in 4 chance of getting that at this point, and you pair that with Walker Jenkins and Luke Keeschel and some other things, you could really start to dream on a lineup a little bit, and even getting 2nd pick, 3rd pick, 4th pick or something. I mean, you're gonna get a good player with that. So that's one silver lining. On the old friends and new places front, Brock Stewart pitched only a handful of times for the Dodgers, got shut down with shoulder problems, tried to make his way back for the playoffs, got shut down right before the playoffs, and is now undergoing shoulder surgery, which is unfortunate. We speculated, it was common knowledge that Brock Stewart had a lot of arm problems.
Sure.
Obviously, that's how the Twins ended up with him. With the Twins, he was very effective when healthy, but often not able to stay on the field for long stretches. And then the fact that they traded him straight up for James Outman. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen James Outman now. I'm not saying he can't be a useful player, but it ain't a big return, really.
No.
He's a 28-year-old AAA outfielder, and he's really struggled in the majors the past couple of years. We speculated even on deadline day that either that was just a horrible trade, like either the Twins just didn't get good value for a decent reliever, or Brock Stewart's medicals must have been scary as hell.
Right. Yeah.
And the Twins must have known that, and the Dodgers must have known that. And I think probably it's safe to assume that
most other teams did too.
Yeah. And then the other old friend in new places is Carlos Correa. And Carlos Correa, at the trade deadline, the Houston Astros had the 3rd best record in the American League. They were, I believe, 92.5% playoff odds, according to Fangraphs, on deadline day. And then they reacquire Carlos Correa from the Twins for nothing in return, and even get some money to pay down his salary.
Yeah.
And then proceed to miss the playoffs with one of the worst records in the American League. Yeah. Didn't even make it as a wild card. And as you said, the wild card spot was at 86 wins?
I think 86. Wins.
which means now, and actually Correa played okay for them. He wasn't great for them, but he was better for them than he was with the Twins. That's not a high bar to clear. He had I think like a 112 OPS plus or something like that. He played third base mostly, but not a lot of power, not a lot of RBIs, but he played okay. It wasn't his fault necessarily. But what that means is Carlos Correa, clutch god, leader of men, well-respected baseball superstar, has now been on a team that went from 92% playoff odds after the trade deadline to missing the playoffs in back-to-back years.
Yeah. Yep.
Boy. And look, this is Rich coming from a Twins podcast because the Twins sucked even worse. So I'm not like bragging on it, but it's interesting.
That's
it's
interesting.
Yeah. And then the last couple things, another old friend, Sonny Gray, who is 2 years into a 3-year, $75 million deal with the Cardinals, which has been a talking point for Twins fans since she left.
Sure.
Never, even Joe Ryan brought it up. Never should have let Sonny leave. Maybe. But Sonny Gray has a 4.07 ERA through 2 seasons with the Cardinals, which is not particularly good. His innings per start are identical with the Cardinals as they were with the Twins, despite that narrative of quick hooks from Rocco and all that stuff. He's been an okay mid-rotation starter, making $25 million a year. I did see, though, that Katie Wu, the Athletics Cardinals reporter, spoke to Gray, and while he didn't specifically request a trade, the feeling is he's going to request the trade. Nolan Arenado is going to request the trade, or at least not even have to request it.
Cardinals missed the playoffs 2 years in a row now, right?
Yeah, which rarely happens
right.
for St. Louis. And so it sounds like Sonny Gray will be on the move. I don't think the Twins have $25 million that they can... Be funny
so 3 teams from the NL Central made the postseason, and none of them were the Cardinals, right? Because Reds, Cubs, Brewers, Pirates are never going to be there.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. And then the last thing, money-wise, Byron Buxton indeed got the first 2 playing time bonuses incentives available on his contract.
Oh, that's cool.
One for clearing 502 plate appearances, what you need to qualify for the batting title, and then one for clearing, I think it was like 535 or something like that. Each one was worth $500,000, so he'll get $1 million on top of his $15 million salary.
And maybe,
right. So, first of all, he produced like 5 wins above replacement this year, and that's just on-field value. He obviously has off-field value in terms of bobbleheads and jerseys sold and being beloved by fans, but that's hard to calculate. 5 wins above replacement gets you about $40 million is the general consensus on what that would be worth in terms of a player valuation. So he's worth $40 million to the Twins. He made $15 million in a guaranteed salary. Like I just said, he's getting $1 million in playing time incentives. And then what you hinted at is if next month when they do the awards, the BBWAA awards, if Buxton finishes in the 6 to 10 range for AL MVP, which I think is very plausible.
I think so, very plausible.
I actually think it's likely. It's not like overwhelmingly likely, but I think it's likely. I don't have a vote for that this year. I have Rookie of the Year. It alternates. I get a different category each year. But if he gets, let's say, 6th or 8th or 10th, anywhere in that range, he gets another $3 million.
Yeah.
I mean, if he finishes 1, 2, or 3, he'd get an even bigger bonus, but I think that's unlikely. If he finishes from the 6 to 10 range, he'll get $3 million, which will take his total compensation to $19 million for the season, which will still be less than half of what he was worth in terms of value to the Twins. Okay. That's it. We're now on to the real playoffs, I would call them.
We will be tuning into the Phillies Dodgers game tomorrow in this household.
I mean, it's a good setup for drama. The 4 remaining series.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. I was rooting obviously for the Yankees to lose, but
me too.
Yankees Blue Jays is great drama. Obviously, I think Detroit versus Seattle is not a series anybody would have pegged as being prominent coming into the season necessarily.
Right. Yeah,
but Detroit is a super interesting team. Just the ups and downs of the past 2 seasons. I do like Detroit that they proved how little momentum means once the playoffs start.
Right.
Just something we've tried to hammer home. I mean, there's all sorts of evidence, but people never want to hear the data on this, which is how you finish the season has almost no bearing on how you do in the playoffs. And this is such a great example. The Guardians came from 15 down. They didn't lose over the last month of the season, while the Tigers blew a massive lead.
And those that run included a 3-game sweep of the Tigers 2 weeks ago, and then taking 2 out of 3 versus the Tigers
Yes.
in Detroit last week. I think Detroit last week, and then now they had to advance. They need to take another 2 out of 3 Detroit
At
this
home,
week.
by the way,
Yeah,
because they
at
won the
home.
division.
Right. Yep.
And Detroit wins 2 out of 3. Now that could have gone either way, so I'm not. But that does show you momentum ain't anything. But yeah, so I like that. Brewers. I'm still rooting for them. I know you're rooting for Phillies to come out of the NL.
Yeah.
But Phillies
But
Dodgers.
I'd be very happy for the Brewers to advance and beat the Cubs.
But even that is a great series. I mean, Brewers
fantastic.
Cubs.
Oh my God. Yeah. Right.
It's so fun.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think the biggest heavyweight battle of the first round, maybe you could say Yankees Blue Jays, or of the second round, Phillies Dodgers.
Yeah.
I think whoever wins that is the favorite to win the World Series.
Ohtani starting in Philadelphia tomorrow. My goodness, that's going to be.
You want to go back to Philadelphia? You were just there a week ago.
I know. I know. Yeah. Well, don't think it hasn't been discussed.
Yeah. And I also maybe we'll talk about this on Monday's Patreon show, but I did put together a list of like all the ex-Twins on all the playoff teams and sort of all the Twins related storylines, even coaches and who they've lost to, who they've won. We're not going to go over it here because we've already talked too long, but it is remarkable. And this is true every year, but like every team has ex-Twins, old friends, Twins related storylines. Like there isn't a single team ever really. And I guess that's just how baseball works in terms of player movement. But yeah, you could definitely come up with who to root for and who not to root for just based on who you did or didn't like when they were with the Twins.
Exactly right.
And the Phillies are probably the primest example of that with Duran and Bader and Kepler and Abel and Clemens would get World Series rings.
Right,
Want to go that far.
Yeah, that's right.
You got the Chrissy bonus factor.
Sure.
Beloved by Twins fans. Yeah, I would say she's beloved by Twins fans. Anyway, we will be back Monday, or maybe Monday or Tuesday. We'll see on the Patreon side. We'll see.
Yep. We'd love to have you join the Patreon, folks. We're going to be, I mean, if you really, I'll warn you, the free podcasts are basically going to happen twice a month during the off season. We're not going to be getting weekly Friday shows anymore.
We scale it back
every other way, right? But we're going to be doing Friday shows when we're not doing Friday shows, probably over on the Patreon side to try and break down both the news, but also like there's a lot of going to be like, okay, here are the different candidates that the Twins are in that we know of, and what we think their strengths and weaknesses are. And here are the free agent pitchers that are out there, or here are the teams that might be willing to trade for Joe Ryan and what their prospects are, and that sort of thing. So I mean, there's going to be a crap load of detailed breakdown stuff. If you really like to follow this stuff,
like I said,
just join the Patreon
at the very beginning. I anticipate it being a very active offseason from a player front, but then also, like you said, we now have the entire manager search, which could last all of October. And we will be reacting to that in real time with emergency episodes. Any trade, any signing, certainly a new manager, any ownership stuff that's relevant. And that'll all be on the Patreon side, commercial free, in the moment, emergency episodes recorded exclusively for our Patreon supporters. It's Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you join. It's like a couple bucks a week or something like that. And you can ride with us all off season. It's a kind of group therapy in a way.
That's right. And to keep this episode free, we want to thank our sponsors, which are Raycon and Prize Picks and Harry's Razors, have been with us forever. And a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. I'm glad they didn't go directly out of business after supplying the beer for your wedding, John. I was worried about that. Just seeing some of the drinking going on there. That's right. They're now being distributed in all of Greater Minnesota. So stop by your favorite liquor store, the Black Stack Tap Room, to grab your favorite brew or try something new. What's the matter with you? Why aren't you drinking Black Stack? Don't you like good beer? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much for listening to Gleeman the Geek.
100% of the beer I've consumed in the year 2025 has been Black Stack. So what's wrong with you guys?
I'm going to work on that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thank you at the end of this horrific season. For sticking with us.
Right.
We've heard from a lot of people who have enjoyed the video element that we introduced a few months ago, and we've mostly enjoyed it too.
We should probably mention that. YouTube.
Yes, we're on YouTube. If you're just listening to this, youtube.com. Some of the jokes play better there on YouTube. The Botox joke, the hairline joke.
That's right.
Because they're probably they hear our voice and they're picturing like Clooney and Pitt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's Rosemary Clooney and Stu Pitt is really who it is. All right, talk to you hopefully next week, early next week on the Patreon, and if not, we'll see you back here.
Bye-bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland